There we go. Thank you. You're the magic man. Appreciate that. And remind me next time I'm moderating to turn in a shorter bio. Sorry, that was a little bit lengthy. My apologies. But I do want to thank the whole team for inviting myself and my guests that will be joining us. We may have a mystery one. I'm not quite certain yet, so we'll just roll with the changes. Um, Super excited to be here for World Logic Day. We are thrilled to be here for a second year in a row to support this event. My name is Wendy Howell, as you well know, and I'm honored to be moderating this panel. We have three, possibly two, possibly four amazing speakers. There was some juggling at the end, all that are industry leaders and innovators. We actually chose to focus on a couple of different SDGs. So we're going to be really looking at education, health and wellness, and hopefully equity if our third speaker is able to join. I'm going to start by asking each of our speakers to introduce themselves with a brief overview and share a fun fact, because I'd like to get started with that. And then we'll dive in. As all the other panels have been great, please stay actively engaged in the chat. We welcome and celebrate all questions. So John, just so you're aware, Hazel, were you able to get off mute?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, beautiful. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to two of my guests. Again, we may have another, we'll see. Mr. Jeffrey Brown, would you please introduce yourself and a little bit about your background and also a fun fact. And the more weird, the better.
Yeah, so thank you for that. And you can hear me okay?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, good. Yeah, so I'm Jeffrey Brown. I'm an industry thought leader. I do a lot of content creation as well as I'm a fractional CTO. One of the companies that I'm working with closely is Pick My Brain, where we're very involved in really changing the future of education, bringing conversations in, bringing experts to the field. I'm also a board member for a local charter school, K through 8. It's a gifted school specifically designed for gifted children, which becomes both a kind of a safe haven and a place for them to come and excel, as well as becomes a resource center for the local community. So we can really make those gifted kiddos shine. In a typical school, right, is percentage of gifted children tend to be very, very small, and finding somebody else to become a peer with is very difficult. Or in our school, we're proud to say that 1 in 3 is pretty much you turn around, you've got somebody there that's like you, right, in that familiar way. So it's very rewarding. I sit at the kind of the intersection of being a parent of a 17-year-old, being on the education side as well as on the technology side as a fractional CTO. I work with many tech companies. And kind of for the fun fact, right, and to kind of stick with the educational theme, right, and kind of play it into a little bit of what we're talking about here a little bit today is in second grade, I was going to be held back. So they were going to hold me back because they had deemed me as slow. Well, and at that time, I wasn't aware. My mother was a single mom of 5. She decided to take the summer, go get me tested, figured out that I had things like dysgraphia that were challenges for me and for, a challenge for me in school. And what was diagnosed from the school side as slow was actually just me being struggled and having needing the appropriate level of support and accommodations. So it was my mom, this little tiny woman, right? She first day of school, marches all of her 5 kids in, gets them all situated, then takes me into the principal's office and says, here's the results of the tests I took over with, the summer with my son, and give me a call when my son can start 3rd grade. She picked me up and marched me right out. Later that day, I got a call, and the rest is history. I started 3rd grade the next day. But kudos to
Fabulous.
mom for, sticking up for somebody like me.
Up with moms, love that. And also another fun fact that I happen to know about Jeffrey as a dear friend of mine is he literally does not forget anything. Any fact, anything you wore, anything you ate, it's all in his brain. It's mind-boggling to me. Thank you, Jeffrey. I'm excited to have you here. And I'm going to turn it over to Hazel, if you would introduce yourself as well and tell us a little bit about your background and a fun fact.
Okay, thank you. Deep boots to fill there after Jeffrey speaking.
Mm.
Yeah, Hazel Chappell. I live in Austin, Texas. Moved here just over 6 years ago. I am a change enabler, so whether that's a change leader, a change consultant, a change practitioner, having worked in healthcare for over 20 years. So in the world of the global transformation, digital transformation, I have the description of a human super connector. So where there are silos of communication or in any aspect, then I can help forge those relationships and build deep and meaningful relationships as well. Prior to that, I have had extensive experience within telecoms and technology, and also within capital markets within London as well. So a fun fact. So I'm really looking. Am I going the humorous side, or am I going to actually share something? I'll share something about myself. I achieved grade 8 very successfully on the piano way back when.
Love that. Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, I say we go ahead and dive right in. We're going to start off a little bit on the education side, and I'm going to have Jeffrey sort of give us a little bit of a level set. I know a lot of you have been on, on the panels most of the day, but from Jeffrey, from your perspective, especially coming from your brain and your side of the technology world, talk about the importance of logic really in pursuit of advancing SDG progress and any other type of progress that you want to throw in there.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, right? And just to kind of along with the fun fact stuff, right? Logic is very, very important to me, right? I used to have a T-shirt with logic on it. I had a license plate that said logic, right? So it is, it's kind of a passion of mine. And in the tech space, it's not that unusual, but being in charge of a school, and the school that I work with is a K through 8th grade, is we have to bring that stuff to as early as possible, right? That mindset of logic. And, even what Hannah and Jamie were just talking about, right? To being able to stand up and debate about something and talk about something intelligently. A lot of that process of being able to break something down into a logical form starts as early as possible, that mindset. So that critical thinking mindset, all of the design thinking, all of those things that today we just don't tend to really get taught. We just kind of absorb them along the way, that, oh yeah, they happen to be good at that. In our school at Academy for Advanced and Creative Learning, we're actually teaching some of these skills, right? Along with our sports teams and stuff that we have, of course, that we normally do with the kiddos. We also have best robotics competition, right? Which is a 6 to 8 week competition that allows them to model an entire company, right? We've got these 5th graders to 8th graders. They're sitting there setting up who's the CEO of the company, right? Who's in charge of technology? Who's in charge of marketing? And in 6 to 8 weeks, they build a robot and promote that robot, and actually, you know, go through a competition. That does some fascinating things, right? Because they have to learn to work together. They learn communication skills as a different level than they would normally. They're going through and learning how the resilience of failure, right? Things don't work the first time. They get emotional, right? So they're learning a little bit of those early things of emotional intelligence. All of these fantastic skills that go well beyond what the SDGs talk about, the mathematics and the reading, right, and the basics, the enablement of internet and computers and access things, the the accessibility for boys and girls. It's got to go way beyond that, right? In order to use the skills that I use every day in my tech field, those skills have to be ingrained. They have to be practiced. They have to be habitual. They can't just be something, oh yeah, I need to remember to do this. So we're starting at a very, very early age to teach some of those to kids.
I love that, Jeffrey. And interestingly enough, I used to coach for an organization called Moolah U, it sounds very similar to what you were doing, where the kids come in and they learn how to, the whole thing from beginning to end, who's the CEO, who's the marketing person, what's the product we're going to build, what's the pricing model. And I'm also a huge proponent, which I think is in line with what you're saying, of starting to teach, if you will, the entrepreneurial mindset, which is, sort of akin to what you were talking about, like from the time a young child can walk, in my humble opinion, because I think that, you know, leads to all of these resilience and different critical thinking aspects as well. So thank you for that. And let's talk a little bit about ed tech. Big, huge word right now. Everyone's talking about ed tech. Where do you see that helping? If, you know, you talked about, you know, everyone needs to have access. What excites you about what's happening in ed tech now, and what do you think that will do from a digital divide perspective?
Yeah, again, sitting on the board, right? It's my responsibility to make sure that technology is there, it's available, and even, you know, of course, we can't go the conversation about without talking about AI, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I was struggling with a school that was the teachers were confused, the students were confused, right? If I do something like this, is it cheating? Is it not? So one of the things that I stood up for our school and for the district as well is to put out there a policy, right? A position statement, right? Is we wanted to have a position that technology wasn't, it's, well, like it or not, it will be the future, right? This is where everybody's headed, and these students need to come out of this world being enabled. They need to understand it. They need to know how to use it, and they can't be afraid of using it. Much, you know, I have to admit that Hazel is a little bit of a, I'm a little starstruck working with her, right? Is she's been on the stage, the global stage, and setting policies, not in a way of setting up fear, right? And to keep you from doing something. She takes that security stance and that fear and turns it into policy, turns it into programs that can really bring that forward. So a lot of what I'm trying to do in the tech space is to take that technology, and tools should be easy for people to use. Tools should be, they should be ubiquitous, right? Let's face it, the kids today's, they have technology from the beginning. My son's had his own
Yes.
laptop since he's been 9 months old.
Right.
It's ingrained. They know how to use it. They're wired that way. We need to lean into that and take that even further, and let that technology become a natural evolution, and build policies, build tools that will help enable people. And in the education system, we can't be afraid of it, right? Is learning how to use any tech responsibly. I
Yep.
don't care what the tech is, it just becomes responsible use. And that's going to come through knowledge and understanding and teaching these kids how to use it.
If I
I
can
love
just
that.
add
Yes,
Please.
something to
please.
that,
Yes.
because you triggered a really important point there, Jeffrey. It's having the need to understand, and there's also the need to communicate that directly to those people. So Wendy, when you talk about, you know, children at a very young age, from the age of 3, it's how do we as parents or as leaders help foster that curiosity to empower
Mhm.
them to be more confident, to want to learn. So you know, and I see that more having a daughter who's doing a master's in higher education, where exactly to that point, Jeffrey, she's going, you know, the technology is there, and it's just having that, you know, collaborative approach of the human side of it to
Yes.
be able to for the technology to enable that critical thinking to develop what we need for today's goals.
True,
Yeah,
true, true.
Hazel, I agree with that, right? And I was I guess I'm trying to use a nice word here, right? I was a little disappointed because one of the schools in the school district last year at a high school level decided to shut down their computer science program. And just couldn't believe in today's days and age, right? That somebody would think that way and do that.
Right.
It needs to be an enablement technology. It needs to be habitual. It needs to be there for everybody to be able to use it, because that's the world we're going into, and it's not going
Exactly.
away. So Hazel, your
It's
point about enabling really becomes that, and the earlier we can start, the better.
absolutely. And Hazel, since we were sort of, we'll bounce back and forth a little bit because I think this is such a great discussion. Um, Jeffrey brought up AI. You know, we were talking about technology. So, what do you envision as far as the impact? I mean, and we could talk about this for a year and a half, but let's try not to do a year and a half. But the impact of AI on healthcare as a whole, whether it be mental health, whether it be the healthcare system, like sort of what are some of your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, it's not going away. We're having to
Correct.
live with it, and it's how do we embrace it now and use it, optimize it to its best use. So,
Mhm.
and if I'm taking actually kind of the steps backward, then what we're doing is we're looking at the data around there. And so rather than actually building the roadmap of moving forward with AI and what benefits that it can bring, if you actually look at the United Nations SDG report from last year, or specifically hone into certain countries, they are not as mature in some global areas as others because of the lack of that data, lack of accessibility of that data. So in answer to your question, then that's where we need to integrate that data to be able to, harness AI and actually look at the validity and to look at the actual what solutions are there as well to optimize what we need for within healthcare. So whether it's actually looking at the chronic diseases, whether it's actually looking at the preventative medicine side, which is a very, what we call now the non-communicable diseases, which is actually, if I can use the word mushroom at an exponential rate, and actually, but not just taking it from the healthcare side, actually empowering the patients as well to own it. And how can they use AI in a powerful way to have a very succinct record for prevention or maintenance of healthcare? And that's just one angle of it as well.
Yeah,
AI can be, within healthcare, it can be used to keep our data more secure as well around the cybersecurity aspect, as well as been more articulate, for example, within imaging and other areas. So it's a big question.
Yeah, it's a huge question. Go ahead,
Wendy,
Jeffrey, please.
So I mean, I'm going to echo some of what, from the tech side. Hazel's right. There's so much, and healthcare is an interesting area, right? Is because there's so much need for security. We have to protect the people themselves, right? And the individuality. But at the same time, that protection has starved the industry from being able to really grow in a lot of ways, right? I've personally had multiple family members who have struggled with illness for years and trying to work after doctor and specialist to find those analysis, right? AI is phenomenal at being able to put data together, right? And to find those patterns and help there's not a lot of time with these healthcare professionals. Their time is very, very short. So if they can get access to real-time data, AI can really start to change that industry, and we can grow healthcare just, to Hazel's point, it can grow phenomenally.
Right, because in today's world, so often you hear the story about, hey, I'm a physician and I actually have metrics. I have to go in and I have to be with my patient for less than 7 minutes because we're on a clock and, the insurance metrics and all of that. I mean, I find it a little bit disturbing, but that's, we could talk about that for a long time. Jeffrey, I'd like you to address how could we how can we work with partnerships and private tech companies and public education to further advance, those pieces of education that we're talking about now? Like, what is the role of partnerships between private and public education?
Yeah, so specifically on the education side, right? So fortunately
Yes.
I've been in a position, I've been a leader in the tech industry for a long time,
Yes.
and I've partnered with schools, right? Even at the high schools, there's a really good school here called Colorado Springs Early Colleges. And one of the things that they do fascinating is they send their students out on a mission to do a job shadow. I've participated in those programs quite a bit. During COVID, I had this fantastic, opportunity to work with Harvard business students for a semester, right? And they were in the computer science role, the computer science program. And what was fascinating is when I started the conversation, when I started working with them, they had both decided to move. These two young ladies decided to move out of the computer industry, right? Because it just wasn't for them. But by the time they were done working with me in my sessions with them, they were in, right? They understood
Love that.
now that technology is more than just writing code, right? There's design systems, there's thought processes, there's creativity, right? Building software. understanding how to work with people and the science behind people, and understanding how to translate that into a good UI that makes sense for people, that's intuitive to use. I mean, think about the last time you downloaded an app to your phone. Did you then go spend the next 3 hours reading manuals and watching videos? Of course not. You played around with it. You figured it out. That ability to translate that logical thinking and bring that thought process to the software so that tools are easier to use, right? That's what they were super interested in. So I think that there's a lot of opportunity for industry leaders, for companies out there to put themselves out there to help people. My son, who's 17-year-old, wants to go in a DevOps role. Well, the only reason he knows that that's even a role is because he's worked with me, right? Most people would think computers is, well, it's coding. If I don't like coding, that's it, right? But it's not. There's so much more to it.
Correct.
Pick My Brain is all about having these conversations with real leaders in the industry, talking to them about students, answering their questions, demystifying what some of these professions are, knowing, well, what exactly does Hazel do? What does her day-to-day look like? What does she have to know, and what does she have to be good at? I've had parents come to me all the time to say, well, how do I get kids into computers? Well, first off, they have to be wanting to, right? There has to be some need. But on top of that, the number one skill I tell anybody coming into this industry to learn is communication skills. It's involved
Absolutely.
in everything you do is communication. And Hazel, I see you're smiling. I know you got some thoughts there. What's your
Oh,
thoughts?
she does indeed. And Hazel, I know that you have a particular anecdote that you wanted to share as well, which I'd love you to do. I think it's very apropos for the moment.
Oh, okay, thank you. Jeffrey, I smiled because I feel that communication is actually one of the biggest barriers within the world of change when I'm in there, and it's having that clarity and being I suppose really efficient with communication and timely. But yeah, when you talk about partnerships, Wendy, within healthcare, to me, it's absolutely fundamental to have cross-sector collaboration, to your point, foster the partnerships between health, education, and economic factors.
Yes.
But there's also the global cooperation as well, collaboration that's happening. So I am indirectly involved with one of the global leaders within actually SDG 3 within the Keep Well, Keep Healthy and Wellness goal. And they're called the World Health Innovation Summit, which is based within England. And they are actually all around partnership and empowerment of people. So one of the things that they have done very successfully, and it was piloted actually within Dublin in Ireland to begin with, is how can we actually keep our healthy community healthy? And what I mean by that is, if you take a patient, for example, that may either through COVID having been isolated, may have mental health issues, and actually goes to their regular GP or their PCP, not being diagnosed with a clinical condition, but it's actually about being part of the community and about preventative, so prevention of care, about declining, because then the burden is on either the hospital or whatever. So there is an initiative that has been set up called social prescribing. And now I will say it's viral across England. So it's whether it's healthcare leaders or whether it's actually non-profits within the community, or whether it can be just actually a whole that's set up for these patients to be officially prescribed non-medication, but actually, for example, to go and play corn dog or whatever it's called, or whether to go
Cornhole.
and play cornhole.
That was awesome.
Yeah, or whether it's to play go and play dominoes and something, and actually have that social prescribing officially, still go back and have the review with their primary care physician. And the metrics that were put in place and for the outcomes exceeded the expectations. So it is, these patients are very well. They're actually getting more involved in the community. So it has become an organic effort, actually. And it certainly is. I'm watching the space, how long it will be before the world. The CEO is a wonderful man called Gareth Presh. He is looking very much for international, if not, he has already done it. I keep waiting in the news every day to see what international relationships he has built. But social prescribing is one. There is actually a playbook about it as well on the website, that if, for example, whether it's a small town in outside Austin, Dripping Springs, or a small town wants to actually develop this initiative
Yes.
to empower the people, to build that community spirit, to actually energize it in a different way through, logic. It's very logical when you talk about it simply.
Hazel, I love the story that you just brought up. And one of the things that comes out of this overall event for the day is us as speakers and panelists, et cetera, sharing items that would be useful for our whole audience. And if there is a playbook that exists for the social prescribing, I think that would be fantastic for us to share. I mean, we can share it in the chat, but I know that the team has also put together a sheet that will be shared out with everyone who has attended. So I'd love to have that in there as well. And since we're sort of on this topic, and then Jeffrey, I'll open it up to you as well for additional comment. And what are your thoughts on, how to ensure that there's equitable healthcare in areas where there may not be any? How do we ensure that people that are in underserved or underrepresented communities, what's the best thing that we can do to drive us towards that, health and wellness SDG, metrics, if you will?
So certainly technology plays a role. If we look back at COVID, actually, then, and telehealth was implemented, and that still has been a significant driver in getting access to health within rural and remote areas. And I did a large piece of work during COVID, actually, within the Florida state at that point in time, and the knock-on effect for hurricanes or fires or whatever the case may be. There is very much a need for education as well within the community to inform people what is available, what is what is out there, and how and whether that's actually through local marketing, whether it's through local events. But we know the saying, it takes a village. So, but also as well, there are lots of investments that are taking place now with innovation in different areas. I know, for example, of a lady in town, and she's a physician, and she actually has resources of physicians around rural health. So whether they actually have to come to a fire station and set up a temporary clinic or whatever the case. So there certainly are, some of the bigger companies as well are very much behind that. So the Googles and the Microsoft are very much now kind of enabling or making available their technology as well to support that communication, to have access to that.
And going back to your COVID example, I know here in Austin, right, there was a huge issue with like rural areas or just slightly outside of Austin, no Wi-Fi. What do? And everyone put hotspots on school buses and drove them out to, areas outside of Austin. It's just you become more innovative the more challenges you are facing, I suppose. And Jeffrey, I think you probably would like to comment on that as well.
If I could just briefly add, hence Starlink, it's actually become one of the biggest providers now because, of that reason. So, sorry, Jeffrey.
No, that was perfect, right? And I mean, Hazel, you know this area so well, right? So, but it's, I like your point earlier about getting involved, right? Going to the fire station, being out there, right? As tech leaders and industries, right? Is those companies, right? Those routers had to come from somewhere as well, right? Is being involved, getting involved in the community. I joined a lot of different local communities. I do a lot to local community. I work with the school districts, right, at the district level to help them understand how to use tech. Which laptops do they buy, right? Which is the best bet for that? How do they spend their money wisely? How do they keep it secure? How do they protect the kids? right? Is if they're going to be using, kids are going to be using AI. So which ones are the safe ones to use for them to use? So being a tech leader, being involved, giving back and giving to the community is a
Yes,
fantastic way to share your expertise. And there's a lot of companies who have a lot of expertise there's a huge need for, and just getting that knowledge out there.
getting it out there. And so, Jeffrey, just on the education piece, so for educators and policymakers, sort of what strategies should be employed to make certain that this whole idea of logical reasoning, critical thinking, all the terms that we've used, how do we make certain that that's a core component of not just learning in elementary, middle, high school, university, but lifelong learning? Like if you start to learn that when you are 3, 5 years old, it sort of leads you on a path to become a lifelong learner, which I think is like one of my core values for sure. But what would you say on that front, and how could we help shape policy as well, coming from our perspective?
Yeah, and I do write policy specifically.
I know.
So,
Hence,
working with a lot of them is right, there's certain things we can't deal with, right? Or we can't touch. There's the core curriculum, right? We have to be able to teach to that. The
right.
state, we get, the schools get funding and stuff for that. So, even at the top level, some of that stuff is there, but how we teach it can be very much within our control. And I work with a lot of the educators in my schools and in my local districts to talk to them about
Hmm.
how they can teach differently, how they can bring that in. I mean,
Yes,
Hazel's point too about, play, right? Is playing with things like Lego and other blocks, right? Is that play can inspire that resiliency, that trial and error, that design level thinking. I think that teaching coding, even for those who don't, I would never want to do that in my career, is
right.
teaching a simple matter of coding is a very simple thing to help build that logical thought process. You have a goal that you're trying to accomplish. You have to be able to break it down to those steps. You have to be able to try it. It's going to fail inevitably the first time, and you have to be able to work through it and work through that problem, get closer and closer to it. And when you're done, you have that eureka moment where everybody now is energized. It's like, I want to do that again, right? So building those skills from a very young age. And a lot of these kids have that, we talked about curiosity earlier. They have that natural curiosity. It's there from the
Hmm.
beginning. We don't want to unlearn those skills, right? Keep those skills going. Learn to play the right way, learn to educate the right way, right? Is how many times do you think about, you pass that test at the end and, well, you had these 10 or 5 questions wrong. Okay, well, you did really well, so let's go on to the next thing. That's not
Right.
real world. The real world is you turn something in. It's an iterative process. We go through and we
Yes.
try to learn more, and we fix those mistakes, and we learn more from our mistakes than we do anything else. So a lot of it is teaching our educators to teach differences differently. And even to the point, I've written some posts myself on stuff on, bringing leadership at the teacher level. Right. One of the things that we've done within our school, again, to build that, we have a whole leadership unit that we do, where the
Mm.
kids at the beginning, they welcome kids into the classroom, they lead the Q&A conversation, they dismiss the kids at the end, right? The kids are actually learning leadership skills at that young age. So they're not learned skills anymore, they're habits, right? They're just how they think now.
Well, that's the hope, but like completely changing the manner in which someone thinks through that iterative process as well. Hazel, anything that you would like to add on that particular topic?
Well, it's about engaging them, it's about empowering them, and we all know the phrase "seeing is believing." So when they're actually doing it, and they feel confidence with the guidance of the leaders and that, well, yeah, you can't describe that feeling for the children. And I'm sure, Jeffrey, you've actually seen that, kind of from the results, whether they skip out from the yard and everything. Um, it there's I guess really I would have a call to action for anybody listening today, that if you're in that space and you don't know what you can do, or how you can help, it's be part of something to help it. And it doesn't make a difference in how or whatever small capacity it is. If you're in a position to invest in something, that's great. If you're in a position to be part of something, to volunteer, it's really that in itself can be rewarding, because when you become self-fulfilled and you start actually being involved in that, the doors just open that you can't describe. So it's that inner happiness as well, and that can be for anybody of any age, of absolutely any age, whether it's somebody who's just retired and they're waiting to do. It's, as somebody once said, well, oh, I've got the MBA or whatever, and the elder person said, yeah, but I've got the experience. So gel those two together, and that's a powerful glue.
I love that. And if you think about I think about my own world, right? I have a daughter who's slightly younger than Hazel's daughter. She's actually studying abroad in, funnily enough, Dublin, Ireland. So hence Hazel has become her auntie, which I adore. But just, what a different perspective she has than what I had, right? Going to university in Europe, learning whole new way of life, traveling to different countries, and luckily I've been able to do that, through my career a lot, and some personal, but it's just it's just really heartwarming to see, a younger person that is getting all this, different points of view from that experience. But I wanted to also ask you, and Jeffrey, you as well. Hazel, your beautiful daughter Laura is, studying higher ed. What if anything has she taken away, or said, "Oh gosh, mom, this is a really tough challenge for me," or what has been her experience in, studying in higher education? Sorry,
Wow.
that was not a question. That was not a
Yeah, no,
question that was on any list.
that is a great question. There are many things, and really, number one, communication is key,
Yeah.
because we do live in a multicultural society today. We may all be focused on the one goal. We've all different ways, to what Jeffrey said in the very beginning. We've all different ways of actually absorbing that information, and some may quicker, some may need some more hand holding. So definitely communication is one. It's very much as well about maintaining the passion of the students. They go into a particular course or whatever to learn something because they have inherent interest, or maybe they had that bulb moment in their life or something like that. But it's actually, how is the engagement and the commitment from the telecom analogy, not just the receiver, but the transmitter as well.
Yes.
And actually, and I'm just thinking about that. So that the more empowered that somebody feels that she has seen, the more actually that the curiosity will be that can be shown to the educator as well. So it becomes this lovely circle of curiosity, motivation, passion, and it becomes cyclical. And she is very her focus is going to be in leadership, and she feels that when we talk about today, she's a daughter of a mother, mom, kindness, why wouldn't everybody be kind? As the Dalai Lama said, be kind as often as possible. It's always possible. And it's true. So
it's very true words.
It's more the human factor that
yes.
But it's necessarily absolutely underpinned by the technology has to be there 100%.
Yeah, it has to be a balance, really, doesn't it?
Balance.
Like the scales of justice, if you will. And I love that term. I might slightly rejigger it, but almost like you were talking about a virtuous circle, and that's a beautiful thing. Jeffrey, as a father of 17-year-old, talk to us about your experience from an education perspective and what you've seen. Your son is obviously a technologist at 17. He probably was at 9, as if I recall correctly. So what other experiences would you have that you would share with the audience today?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's fascinating, right? And I'm gonna kind of take that and run a slightly different direction with it, right? But when you
Perfect.
look at the SDGs, right, a lot of it's about, with the United Nations and stuff, they're evolving society, right? As they're trying to evolve who we are today and take us to the next level as an entire society. So that's got, we've talked a lot of this about doing this at a younger age. And I think that we don't necessarily always give these young kids the credit that they deserve, right? They're brilliant, they're smart, they see more than we think they do, right? And it's fascinating to watch the youngest kids all play together. They don't think about, talk about equality. They don't even know what the word is. They don't think of it, right? And
Exactly.
somewhere they unlearn that capability, right? If we could harness that, if they could stay, innocent to a point of view, if they could stay to the point where, hey, in 30 seconds, the kid runs back and said, I made a new friend, right? Is that acceptance of each other, right? And then a lot of these SDGs will have to come through true by really changing that society at that core level, at that base level, at starting at that youngest age. Just like how technology is advanced and kids are now, wired to their devices and they know how to use them just second nature. If we really bring a lot of that thought process back to those youngest kids and start teaching them differently, just a whole different point of view, a whole different way of looking at the world, that can start at that level and it will evolve the society. So we're a lot of asking from a policymaker, what am I doing? But, I'm trying to enable those who are in the power and the position to help them really help drive that change at the youngest level, because that's what's going to carry society forward, is to really make that change as early as possible.
Yes, agreed. And add on. So we talked a lot about, the goodness that comes from technology, the importance, the criticality of, having sort of technology as an underpinning. Let's talk about something crazy, Jeffrey. Social media. Okay, that's technology. What's it, the good, the bad, and the ugly relative to that? Because there's a little bit of an underbelly, right, on some parts of technology, and both, all of us have had, kids that are now young adults. Um, there's some challenges, going through as a young female in high school and social media and Instagram and all of that. So friend or foe, social media. I don't know.
Yeah, and there's a lot of schools that are now like, trying to make schools device free, right? And very intentionally, because I've seen a lot of, even at the middle school level, right? These kids develop relationships that are through the devices, right? They'll come in on a weekend and they'll be so upset about something, and it's like, well, did you guys talk it through, right? Well, no, the whole interaction happened completely through text, right? Yes, so social media, not only that, but it's also understanding those limitations and understanding how to use it responsibly, understanding that these tools are there, but they cannot be a replacement for conversations, right? This World Logic Day is people getting together and sharing their experiences, learning from each other, right? It's a prime example of where we need to do. So where we need to go. So taking these kids and helping them understand that the responsible use of technology is a key part of it.
Yeah,
Hopefully that answered your question.
No, it does. It does, brilliantly put. But Hazel, I'm ready to hear what you have to say about this as well.
You know my reactions. I'm going to quote Jeffrey. I'm going to come at that from a different angle as well.
Perfect.
Because many years ago, we heard a certain leader talk about fake news and information, and now we talk about misinformation.
Yes.
So there are many people actually who speak out there, and even if you use, a resource like Quora or something like that, and if you eat this, you won't be able to get out of bed in the morning. Really, strawberries or whatever, I'm making it up.
Yes,
it's actually as part of the critical thinking. That's when actually it's either a resource or when used appropriately to question and investigate the claims of whatever is the critical questions from the source of evidence or whatever they're looking for. It's also an opportunity to seek reliable sources as well. And whether we have the AI tools, Perplexity, Claude, now we've got Deep something, which I've seen, DeepSeek or something from China, and all of this, rather than just necessarily the social media of TikTok, which I am publicly delighted to see is being challenged, but also as well, this misinformation, can be analyzed for logical reasoning to evaluate evaluate evidence really and determine accuracy as well. And it's I guess my last point that I'm just thinking, it's about scrutinizing as well viral claims.
Correct. And being able to think through that. We actually did, I think both of you may have been on that. We did an event a while back, and it was like the difference between deep fakes, misinformation, disinformation, and what can we as a society do. And in fact, I think someone who I was hoping would be able to speak today who was not able to, she's attacking that from a governmental and a societal perspective, I suppose, with her foundation that is really focused on misinformation and disinformation when it comes to the election process. I mean, what more horrible place for there to be misinformation and disinformation? And we all know that it's crazy out there. And if you don't have that logical mindset, Jeffrey, as you mentioned, and Hazel, how do you, as perhaps a younger person, or even an old lady like me, like, how do you distinguish? And you just really have to think through it quite heavily.
Yes.
Comments?
Yeah,
okay.
I agree. And I think that some of that's, developing some of those critical thinking skills, right? To not just take everything at face value, but to challenge it. I teach a lot of in my leadership trainings and stuff is this, teaching people to, once you've come up with something, challenge yourself, right? Is it right? Assume you're wrong. What if for a moment you assumed you're wrong? Right, is being able to do those and again make those become habits, right? As those need to become habitual skills that we use every single day, so that when we do see something, we challenge something, right? And to Hazel's point is where do you get those sources of truth, and where do you look at those to be able to say, well, this isn't a trustworthy source. But even just being able to challenge things, even if it's a healthy way, even if you're challenging what is known as the status quo, it's a good thing to have those conversations.
Well, not just or sorry, Hazel, just challenging yourself, but also being open to and welcome to having discussions where we are, respectfully challenging each other. If we don't have that, we're not in a good place.
And you're using logic, right? Every time you use those skills, those are foundationally logical skills.
And actually, to that point, Jeffrey, that where we all, anybody even on the call, what we all have in common is that we're a patient, and whether it's actually challenging our clinicians or whether they use that reference, source or the online source as well to actually share accurate information from WebMD or from, Mayo Clinic or somewhere like that, so that's that can be a healthy thing, when you want to know something and you get a handout going out saying that you've got a strep throat and you're not dying of something, or whatever the case may be. So there's
well said. And some of those things, right, is because of what Wendy goes back to earlier, is that limited time with doctors, right? And then also, how do you come to this stranger that you're talking to for 7 minutes, however, so often that you're doing, and say, here's my life story, here's everything about me, here's these intimate details about me, right? Is it becomes safer to go out and search for some things and find out about some stuff. And we want people to be informed, but at the same time, do you, where are those sources they can go get informed from? So it's a very complicated conversation.
Yeah.
The whole thing. And then go back to data, right? And privacy of data and all those things. I figured that's where you were going to go, Hazel.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
access to data.
Okay. So I have a maybe perhaps provocative question. We're going to, if anyone wants to put any questions forward, we have about 6 minutes left, it looks like. Please, thank you for the comments on Jeffrey's contribution. Getting good props there, Jeffrey. If you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat, or I can have you guys come off mute. I think someone can. I can't take you off mute. Hazel, if you could change, okay, 6 minutes left. If you could change one or two things about the healthcare system, what would it be?
Sharing of
data.
Not
that that's a big question. Okay, sharing of data.
Sharing of data. I have been for a number of years a very strong advocate of sharing of data. I'm publicly on record about having interoperability and health information exchange, because that is the way that we as patients can get the right data and know who we are and be more informed with ourselves. In addition as well to the time factor about the right decision being made in a timely manner for patient safety and reducing risk.
So very good. And then, of course, I'm sure you would comment on sharing of data in a way that is continues to keep it private and, you know, ensuring that we're all owners of our own data, I guess, as well. I think is something that I've heard. Jeffrey, I'm going to ask you the same question about education. You have one or two things that you would change about our current education system.
Yeah, I mean, and you know, there's a lot of different education systems, right? So it's a pretty big
Exactly.
question. But the one thing that I
question.
would do, right, is I remember the time when I was a parent and I was, you know, pretty appalled by my child being in kindergarten classroom and the teacher standing up and saying, okay, girls on this side, boys on that side, right? Is that drives me crazy that at that young age we're starting to build that you know, one of the SDGs is about equality and you know, that diversity. And I believe that, that you know from the early stages, we've got to look at these things from a community. Kids, like I said earlier, will play with each other just without even thinking about it. And we somehow start to unlearn that capability. And I really want, you know, for me is to start at that end, you know, at that early age, build that society from that level and trust the fact that those things will become a mindset change and a mindset shift that will come forward. A lot of the things we deal with, right, in some of these SDGs, we look at them and we're just because people are not listening to each other, they're not understanding each other. It's simple activities, and logic can play a huge part into that whole role of critical thinking skills, understanding things, design thinking. These are all invaluable skills that will really lift society and take them to the next level.
Well said.
I think that's so true, because if you think, how do I put this tactfully? If one thinks only with emotion and without the critical thinking, I think that's where you end up with this huge divisiveness and polarization, like government and like my party is this, your party is that, I hate you, blah blah blah, which makes me crazy. So it's about, you still want to have that emotional, you know, piece about you, but you know, approaching something from purely emotion without the critical thought process, or you know, whatever you want to call it, I think is a huge challenge. Oh,
and it leads to respecting each other too, just respecting each other's opinions.
exactly.
So we have a hand raised, so I'm thrilled.
We have a hand raise. I'm excited. Please go ahead with your question. Are we going to put that into text, or let's see?
No, we got unmuted.
Hello,
so
how are you?
Hey, how are you? Thank you for your question.
I'm enjoying the conversation.
Thank you, Tema.
I think the first thing I would like to talk about is the role that emotions play in critical thinking or logical thinking.
Yes.
My understanding of that is that it's hard to separate people from their emotions. But if you can teach people emotional literacy, they can manage their emotions better if they know what emotions are and how they work. And after teaching emotional literacy, you then introduce the concept of trauma in terms of what may have happened to a person that may intervene, or let's say interfere in their conversations with other people. It's not your responsibility that what you say triggers me. But if you teach me, if I can learn about emotions, my emotions become my problem, and I can start to address them better. So I think if people could learn more about how emotions affect them, then they can start managing them better and becoming more available for critical discussion. Sometimes critical discussion means that somebody is going to say something that you don't like.
Correct.
And it must only end up in your head. It mustn't go to your body. It mustn't change your breath, you know.
That's a really good point. Yeah.
So for somebody to be able to even listen to a person without reacting, they need to have their emotions under control. And you cannot control something that you don't know.
That's a good point. And
I
going back
love
to,
that
go
mindset,
ahead.
right?
Yeah.
And you know, as from our school's point of view, right, and having gifted kids, they're naturally wired in such a way that they have a very high sense of justice, and their emotional, you know, comes time to go from zero to, you know, to high, right, immediately. So helping them to learn how to control those is, you know, I once described emotional intelligence as having all the tools in your toolbox and knowing which one to pull at the right time, right? So you can use it. So teaching
Right.
the kids that advocacy, teaching them how to, you know, to advocate for themselves in a way that's responsible, but also to be able to appreciate those emotions are real, right? We don't want to dismiss them, right? I love the
Right.
comment about being a part of your body. They're a part of who you are, but then learning
Beautiful.
to use them responsibly and to advocate for yourself in other ways instead of just getting emotional about it, and how you can make that point. I think it's a brilliant comment. So thank you for that.
If I can give
Yes.
just one I know we're top of the hour, one tool
Yeah, that's okay.
to sometimes how to manage that is actually ask a question back. So if
Mhm.
something is a trigger, it's like, well, tell me more why, or something like
Yes.
that. But tell me, you hit the nail on the head. It's about that self-control, which in some instances come with maturity, subject to what area of life we're in, what
Yes.
stage of life we're in.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
listening,
That
Hazel,
was,
like you said, listening is a big part of that.
yes, absolutely fantastic discussion. Love you both. We went everywhere. We went all over. We're completely off script, and I love that. So I'm going to turn it back over to John and Chelsea and Chris. Thank you so much for your time. Thanks to the entire audience for listening and providing your comments as well. And let's do it again next year.
Thanks, Wendy.